Hey, how's it going everyone? Ryan here and welcome back to TPGL Adventures. Now, after covering the first two rounds of the group stage, the tournament actually accelerated so quickly that I didn't even have enough time to make the videos for the previous two league stage games. Now, the league stage has finished and we've moved on to the knockout stage. And 4 players made it into the semifinals. Ilya, Tanguy, Artem, and myself. Now, today's video will be about my 3 semifinals games. Now, a little bit of a spoiler because I said 3 semifinals games. As you know, it's a best of 3. But of course, if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on the other 2 rounds of the group stage, I'd be happy to make videos on those as well. Let me know in the comments. Today, we're going to talk about my semifinals game against Artem Kachanovskyi. Now, I've played Artem in the second iteration of the European Pro League, and I did manage to win against him in those games. However, Artem's style is very scary because it's so calm that, the games are very, very long, which means that, when a game is long and undecided and remains even, there's so much room to make mistakes. This semifinals was a huge test to my consistency. Because when the game is close, any small mistake could tip the game in your opponent's favor, and you can have no chance after that. Was I able to claim victory, or did I fall victim to Artem's brutal consistency? Let's take a look at the games. Let's take a look at Game 1. Game 1 is always so critical because, first of all, both players have the most energy because it's the first game of the day. And also, both players really want that first game because after you win 1, all you have to do is just get 1 of the 2 to finish it off, right? Awesome feeling. So in this game, I was playing white, and Artem started with a very classic opening, almost a little bit rarer these days, but it's one of the openings I used to like to play a lot. So I went with the low approach and 2-space extension. This is sort of a message, a mini message I wanted to convey to my opponent that slow and steady, fine, let's do it. So black just continues in the opening, and we have a few quick josekis. Now this is the moment where something a little bit changed, which was my mindset. In the game, I did not play a normal move like the 2-space extension. This is of course a very big move because black's pincer is a very natural invasion on the left side. And this would have been just continuation of a normal opening, and white would develop the moyo and battle black's very solid territory. Now, in the game, I decided to play this move. But then, right after I clicked that move, I realized that this is a gote variation. Right after this, black has such a natural invasion. And at that point, this game already felt a little bit out of rhythm. It's not fully in my control anymore because at this point, black has not only very solid territory, but as long as black can deal with this group on the left, black has a very clear territory advantage. And so that tiny little thing in my head started and continued to affect me. So in the game, I also played the incorrect invasion move. Now, in the 2-space extension, there are 2 common invasion moves if you want to steal away I space, right? B9 or B10. Well, you might be thinking, what's the difference, right? You're just stealing away the I space. Well, there is quite a big difference because in the game, when black blocked and turned, white's group is also being cut off, while white is connected to an alive group. Now, the benefit of white playing this move is that if black blocks or just pushes on top, it is actually not very good for black to block right now because white could push and create a bunch of cutting points. So that's definitely not a good variation for black because black will get gote and now white can attack. Now, if black connects, then white would obviously connect back to the upper group because then this group would be a lot stronger and white would never have to worry about it in the future and can just focus on attacking black. So that actually turned out to be a very big difference, because after this, black escaped, and when white jumped, black cut, right? So black is coming back to counterattack. And throughout this game, we started a very big fight here, and the main reason why this fight actually happened was because white didn't choose the correct invasion. So in Go, when you think back and review a game, a lot of these subtle differences actually really exaggerate as you continue the game and as you see the moves evolve. That's one aspect about Go that I've always liked, and I thought was the most interesting. So at this point, white can't just extend now because the groups was too weak, so I decided to simply give black the upper side and instead come over to attack black. So, of course, black has a lot of points, but then black made a slight mistake here, which I thought allowed me to gain a bit of an advantage, because this peep was a little bit too idealistic, I think, because black is actually very weak, and this cut, although it could be threatening, but black has to worry about so many things before black is able to cut. So black protected this, and then the fight continued. So when all of these variations happened, I was actually very happy, because I cut off the left side. Black's whole group is in attack. But this is this sort of like false happiness that really affects your game, because there is actually no reason for white to be extremely happy. If you think about it logically, black has gotten so much cash on the upper side. Black has made at least 20 points, right? White cut these stones off and made about 15 points. And black's group here, as long as it can escape, white's outside is also a little bit weak. So if you think about it that way, there's actually no reason for white to feel really happy about the game. And because of this false sense of happiness, that caused me to play a little bit too safe and actually miss out on a couple of the really good moves that I could have played. So don't get me wrong, this game is very close and white could be slightly ahead. However, because of a few subtle moves, for example, this move is much better for the outside. Although it could be short on liberties, but it's way better for the outside, and white definitely should have played here. So now let's continue the fight. So black is attaching out, and white has to defend a couple of weaknesses, which allowed black to escape. Now this is the point where I played several moves that really didn't make sense. So the first move was this peep, because after black pushed, there's really no follow-up move, because if white simply pulls this back, then black can protect the cutting point. So after these exchanges, white actually became a lot weaker. But white should still have played this way, because in the game, wanting to save so many variations, this was the downfall for me, is because I just wanted to save so many variations, but then my opponent just kept playing places where I wanted to save, but I didn't realize, there were big moves and my opponent could just play there. So it was sort of over-optimization, if you will, right? So it's like, I wanted to get so much out of one area, but then I could have just accepted a very good result. But then I didn't, and because I wanted to get more than I could have gotten, then the game kept moving away from me. And this was another critical point. So over here, obviously, I think most people would just extend, right? This connects the groups. Also, since the cut at G11 was sente, black's group is still in a lot of danger. White keeps all of the territory, and white should still be ahead. But then, somehow, I didn't play there because I wanted to optimize. I wanted to threaten black first and then decide what to do in the corner. But my opponent took advantage of that, took the first move, and stole a lot of territory in sente. So after all this series of exchanges, not only is black pretty much alive, black lived easily by playing a G3. Then there's enough ice space over here to make this group alive. So after black lived, then it's back to a battle of territory. So black attached. And then again, you see, when I look back at this game, I'm just thinking to myself, why am I just not playing the obvious moves? If I just played like half of the obvious moves, I would have been completely fine. But then I didn't, and I just kept trying to gain more and more in places where it's unnecessary, which were clear overplays. So if white just plays these normal moves, even though white lost the territory over on the left, white gains territory on the bottom and steals black's territory, and this game is still very, very close. Unfortunately, I did not do that. So after black pushed, I realized that if white just blocks, black could play here, and I didn't want that because this loses points. White cannot answer anymore because white needs to answer black's attachment still. So I still didn't block, and after this move is when the game completely escaped. And the final mistake was the extension move was extremely slow because at this point white does not have enough time to continue threatening black. I was still in that false moment in which I was thinking, oh, I need to threaten my opponent, I need to keep going, right? But if you really look at the board, white's group in the middle is looking very weak. The upper right corner is so empty and way more important than this local move. So after this move, my opponent really took the advantage away and completely stole the game. So after this move, the wedge and connect was also a very good move. Black pushed and cut, which is a very simple way to deal with this. And after black developed a lot of strength here, white cannot simply reduce from above. White has to invade now. But then look at the center, right? The center is not even alive yet. It's a group among all of this huge, thick black stones. And all white gained was really some corner, a little bit of corner points. So at this moment, I've already, there was no way. If black played reasonably well, there was no way for white to come back. So in the game, I tried to, make it into a case where there was room for my opponent to make mistakes, but my opponent answered extremely well, and there was simply no way for me to make that group alive. So that was game one, and of course, I didn't feel very well after losing that game. But it's a best out of three, so of course you're always still in it. So going into the second game, I cannot lose. I have to win both game 2 and game 3. Just before we end the first game, the flow of the game, starting from the beginning, was already a little bit awkward, and that indirectly affected how I performed for the rest of the game. Those subtle moments where I mentioned, that it was slightly off. Just something was not right. But take nothing away from opponent, because when I made those arguably subtle mistakes, they completely snatched the game by playing those accurate moves and very clear variations that made black into a clearly leading position. It's not looking good for me. Now, on with game 2. We both took a 20-minute break, both back on. It's time to start. One thing that is really important in these serious games or any tournament is that you have to regard every single game as a new game. You can't let any previous game affect your mentality. And I guess that's something that really clicked after I participated in so many tournaments, and after I did allow myself to capitulate after losing a few frustrating games. So it's really important not to let yourself do that. So going into game 2, I was pretty fully equipped, going with my go-to opening, just playing casually again. So the first move that surprised me a little bit was white's knight's move. I was expecting Artem to play just a very smooth flow moves like this attachment. Black doesn't really have that many choices. So we pretty much have to go with this Koji AlphaGo Joseki here, and I was planning on approaching. So I almost had this variation in my head already up to that point, and I was ready to embark on another slow and steady journey into endgame. But to my surprise, that did not happen. So in the game, white actually played simply a knight's move. And this local shape actually... I've seen it a lot in high-level games as well as some human versus AI games. So after black kicks and does a pincer move, white does the attachment and 3-3 invasion. And this is almost a Joseki sequence, where white gives up the corner, but white in sente makes this group very strong. And after white does that, white comes over to the lower right to attach. So this is almost a very standard variation now. But I actually deviated from the variation in the game. I didn't want to simply jump. Now, learning from my mistake in the previous game, the flow of the game was actually wrong for me. But in this game, if I had jumped, I think I would have embarked on a similar path. Because in this game, black just doesn't... It's a pure black having tiny territory game, and white is generally very strong. But white still has a lot of potential to build left over. So with having such a large Komi burden, I didn't really want the game to go that way. Now, it's not saying that it's bad for black, but personally, I just really don't enjoy playing this type of games. Because black has the only weak groups, and white has so much influence to build on. So in the game, I decided to go with a little bit of a different move. So this is a relatively patient move, and my reasoning here is that it's to give white the least amount of aji so that my stone will still be intact. Of course, here it's not very good for black to hane because then it would just give white extra stones, and black has to protect the cutting point. So that would just leave weaknesses for the future. So I decided to extend, and white capped. And then we quickly started this fight. So white ataris and extends. Now, at this point, of course I looked at the cutting variation. Now, this variation actually simply does not work for black. It's not a choice thing, it just simply is bad for black. Because after black sacrifices the 2 stones, black cannot capture the white stone. It looks like it's possible, but it's actually not. Because after this, black has to double Atari. Because if black Atari's on the outside, white can connect. And this is obviously not working for black. So if black has to Atari, white would obviously not capture because the group would get captured. So white would turn. But then black would lose the center. Even though black gains the corner, but this loss is too much. And this is clearly better for white variation. So I was looking at that and I was getting a little nervous because I was like, this fight doesn't look too good. But then I realized, okay, so it looks like I can jump because I can always knights move. So if I can make the group locally alive, both of the white groups are still not alive. Right? So then it would look pretty good because then my 2 stones would be still cutting them off and we would still have to fight. So when I jumped, to my surprise, white actually pushed and cut. Now, I was actually unsure what to do if white just pushed because still the cut doesn't work because when white turns, black cannot block. So I was actually sort of waiting for white to simply go on top. But in the game, white pushed and cut, which actually made it a bit easier for black to make this group alive. And the second subtle mistake white made was that white didn't connect. So in this local shape, white should definitely connect. This is much better of a shape because it's very difficult for black to make this group alive. I was planning on attaching and sacrificing. So white could wedge and then attach, and this would capture. But this would leave a weird ko because when black clamps, white has to Atari and then hane. So this would leave a ko at T8. And I was actually planning on attaching in the upper left corner because this ko is very heavy for white. And this also, because after black wins the ko, black can not only capture the white stones, but black can continue attacking white's other group by playing P11. So all of that was happening in my head. I was thinking about all those things while waiting for my opponent's next move. But white played here, and that actually helped black quite a bit because if white blocks now, black is simply alive by playing here. So now since black is very clearly alive, then white's outside will have some problems. So in the game, after pushing out, white fixed the cutting point. Now this is another subtle mistake because I think white should definitely have played here, right? This move is clearly better than simply Atari. It actually, not only better for points, but actually eye space as well. So at this point, I was like, after white captured here, it seems that the fight is slowly shifting in my favor because white made those two quick mistakes. Now I could just simply take the points and continue the running fight, which is what I did. So after these jumps, I felt a little bit better. So originally when I just got cut, it looked very unclear. My group was getting surrounded, and it doesn't look like there's a clear way to live. But at this point, it was looking a lot better. Because on the right side, black took a lot of territory. And on the other hand, white didn't take very much territory at all, especially after white giving up a very solid upper right corner. So at this point, black is already leading a little bit, I believe. And as long as white cannot counterattack black, all these one-space jumps, then I think black has a small lead. So after diagonal, I'm not sure why white played this diagonal because I don't think this really benefits, but white extended, and then black just continues taking the big moves. Now, this is a point where I thought white could have played a little bit better because I think the right side was clearly better for black. So white really needs to, do something in the middle. Because if white just lets black connect these groups, then white would not be able to benefit anything from the attack. And territory-wise, black is clearly leading. So if I was actually looking for, something like that. So if I were white, I might go for some move like this because it indirectly pressures black. And later on, white could still come over to attack black. So I think this would make the game more complicated. So in the game, white kicked and just pincered. This is a very standard move, but I don't think it's very good in this case because after black just jumps out, it threatens the attached and 3-3 invasion because now this stone is very close. So white in the game just simply protect the weakness. This also felt quite good because, this is really only, this is white's only territory. And if you do a quick count, you'll realize that black has more territory than that. So I didn't really choose a very complicated variation. I simply just played the cap. And just now, this would force white to live on the upper side, and all black has to do is ensure that white doesn't just simply split these groups off and just attacks them, right? And it even looks like black might gain some territory in the middle. Maybe black should just shoulder and hit and jump, right? This seems like a very clear variation where we're reducing white as well as securing the center. But in the game, I actually had quite a lot of time left, but on the other hand, my opponent didn't. So I felt, it might be a good chance for me to benefit a little bit because when your opponent doesn't have that much time, they don't have that much time to read very accurately. And in more complicated variations, it seems beneficial for yourself. This is sort of like a very tiny mental thing. It really, you shouldn't really think that way, I guess. But I guess I was a little bit overconfident here, and I was thinking, okay, I can probably inch a little bit more, get a little bit more from my opponent here because they don't really have that much time. And as a result of that, the game became a lot more complicated. So after tarring in here, black continued to attack white. So here, white has to find a good way to deal with this group, and it's not easy. So in the game, white extended and attached, and then I decided to target the stone because this feels like a very big move, and I wasn't really afraid of white going into the center because it's going right into my own stones. So in the game, white just diagonal, and then I came back to haunt it. Because if white just goes towards the center, white would lose even more points, right? Because this knight's move simply captures everything up top. And so here, white is realizing that they can't sacrifice any more points, and they have to play aggressively. So this variation is quite complicated, but at that point, I've already read out most of the results. So even though the connect back is maybe a little bit too aggressive, but I was actually just a little bit too arrogant, I guess. I probably should have just played the move to secure the center. So in the game, I didn't really want to do that because it wasn't really clear how. So here, black could just peep and pull back. White would probably need to cut these two stones off, and then this would leave a co-variation in the corner, which is quite something for white to worry about. And but the problem is that it's a ko, right? You don't really want to leave sort of long-standing kos when you're leading. So I shied away from this variation. I decided to simply go with the most direct one, because this forces white to push into black, and this would actually indirectly reduce the amount of variations that you have to think about. So in the game, I just played this, and I pretty much read the variation out. It looked quite complicated, and I guess white probably shouldn't have exchanged this Atari, because the cut didn't really work. So by exchanging this Atari, it reduces a lot of worry for black, because white could. There is, some possibility for white to exchange. At least white has this other Atari here, which could help connect back as well. So I felt like this was also simplified things a little bit. And then when white cut, I already saw that there was this double wedge situation. So by sacrificing the stone in the middle, although black let white live, but notice how white had to push black into reducing the left side. So this is still nevertheless a good variation for black. So by attacking white, black has not only simplified the game, but also gained a little bit of monetary profit here. So white captures, and then after this, it was pretty much smooth transition, because black simply had more territory. Now, this is a little bit of a highlight at the end, and I think this is an interesting moment, because in the game, white haned, and so here black could capture, right? And then white would probably capture the corner, and then black could come over to capture the dragon on the top, and then white could continue to play endgame. So this is probably an attempt for white to make the game more complicated. I mean, in 30 seconds, at that point, by the way, we're both in Byoyomi, and it feels that black is gaining more, but you just never know, right? So in the game, I just decided to go with the very clear variation, because if white were to continue, it would be gote for white. So white does not have time to do this, because black could come over here and capture. So this wouldn't be a very good variation for white. I mean, in Byoyomi, you kind of just have to go with the variation that you know. If there is something concrete, then you should just pick it, right? So in the end, white came back here, and then black just captured this. And after that, it was pretty smooth sailing. So that was a very interesting kind of niche moment there. So yeah, endgame was pretty calm. Nothing too much, except I made a pretty big mistake here, but it wasn't a very big deal, because black's lead was relatively big at that point. So I mean, I did win the second game, but it was such a huge fight. So it started all the way from the beginning. I had to read so hard, also on the top. So it was just such a hard fight. And at the end of the second game, I was already almost exhausted. So it was just, there's so much reading to do. And, at that point, I just didn't want to read anymore. But, of course, the game 3 is up, right? The whole point of, working so hard here was to have a chance, to bring the games even, to have a chance in making it to the finals. So we're now 1-1 square, and it's time for game 3. Now, both players took white and black once, and in game 3, we nigiri again. So, after 4 hours almost of long fighting, it's still square, right? It's basically, we haven't done anything, but we were so tired back then, because both of these games took so much reading, and consecutive games are very, very tiring. But that does not lower any of our fighting spirits for this game, and we're back in it. So in this game, I was actually lucky to have white, because I think typically for games, very important games, having the white color is a little bit of a psychological boost, because your opponent has to pay for komi, and with most of these openings, it's hard for black to actually benefit from that first move advantage. So I felt I had a little bit of a psychological bump when I nigiried as white and took the white stone. So the opening was very casual, and notice that when my opponent attached in the lower left corner, I decided to go with the descent, which is sort of like, I don't want to go with the crazy fights anymore. Let's just play peacefully. So black invaded the 3-3, white would invade another 3-3 corner. This is all pretty casual. So black extends, and then white pincers. This is all very standard moves. Now, black actually extended, which left gote, which allowed white to play this knight's move, which I was very happy with. And interestingly, I just recently looked at some of the variations with this knight's move in a case where black had the pincer, or if black had the stone on the lower side. Now, in this case, to my surprise, black also pushed and cut. Now, I kind of, in the back of my head, I thought this could be a small overplay. I mean, just could be. There's a possibility that was the case. Of course, I wasn't really sure about that, but just thinking that way actually helped me clarify this situation for myself a lot. Because, I was looking at the situation where black actually had the pincer stone, right? And then white could still knight's move according to AI. And now black doesn't have the stone, and white has the lower left corner, and black is still pushing and cutting. So something about this move just feels like it could be a small overplay. Now, I went with the attachment move again. This is a very typical AI attachment. And I was expecting the upper hane because I actually saw this move from this again, right? And then at which point white would hane and descend, and black would connect. And then I was actually just planning on giving black this side and then developing on my own. So white is connected here because of the liberty here with the white stone above. So it would still be a relatively peaceful game because black would continue to develop this moyo and white would just secure the rest of the territory. So I actually thought that the hane under was a bit of a mistake because after white hanes and cuts, after black connects, when white descends, it's almost sente. So black pretty much needs to spend a move in the middle because if black, let's say, maybe jumps or even knight's move or pushes, if white simply extends and then just ladders, it seems very good for white because, black's corner is about the same. White even got the two stones, but just capturing the stone is just so good, right? It reduces black's moyo, but it also very nicely expands the white's lowered moyo as well. So this just seems really good for white. But if black has to answer here, when white gets to turn, it's just so hard for black to prevent white from making this group alive. So at that point, I was pretty happy with this result already. And as long as white could live, white pretty much invaded this for free, right? And forced black to live in the corner. So that was really my only goal at that point. So when black captured, I just diagonal because that threatens to invade at the 2-2 point. Black's corner is not completely alive. So I was actually looking quite hard at this variation. The clamp, extend, peep, and then, white probably has to hane and then connect. And then I was, thinking very, very hard on the capture race. It seems like black just can't take a hold of white. White would have enough liberties. That was my conclusion, which is why I played this diagonal. But that didn't happen, so black defended, but I was happy because, my goal was just to live. And as long as these groups are alive, white would benefit because originally the right side was controlled by black. And if you look at the rest of the board, the moyo isn't really big. It doesn't really have anywhere to continue to expand. So at this point, I was like, maybe I'll have this. I was actually thinking about the comeback, but quickly I nudged that thought away because, when you're playing a game, you just can't think about the result. That just affects all of your logical thinking. And as hard as I was trying to do that, something bad did happen. So I played this move. This was such a big mistake. And the big problem with this move is that if white descends, black actually has to protect in the corner. Otherwise, it is a ko. But the problem with my move was that after this exchange, after white descends, black can simply make the eye. So this was a disaster because now black could cut. So black could even cut first and then make the eye. Because now black threatens to capture white. And that is a huge problem because now it's gote for white, right? That's a huge, it's pretty much what black protects the corner in sente, right? If white simply descended without exchanging this move, black cannot play t5 because white could have just Atari and then kill the corner. So that was a huge mistake because of that unnecessary exchange, black would have taken like a free move here, right? Because if black takes this move now, even though it's whole board thinking, but the corner is in a ko, right? That is a very big burden to worry about in the future, especially as we enter endgame. So that was a huge mistake because then, my opponent could just connect, and I pretty much lost the move. So I was a little bit panicking, a little bit almost, but then after this clamp, my opponent didn't actually connect, and I thought that was a very clear game by white. So because if black simply connects, white still has to come over here and deal with this thing. White could connect, but still, white gets gote, and then black can come back here. And I think that would be way better because in the game when black didn't connect, white got the free capture, right? So basically, although black still got sente, but white got a huge territory benefit here by spending a move, which was completely worth it. So I was about to give up my lead, but then somehow it was handled back to me. And after white just gets the first move again, this game was just too good for white because if you look around, white just has way more territory. White has the right side, white has the upper right corner, and white has all of this lower territory. But the lower right corner, black only has a few points. Black really only has the top left. This moyo is really not worth that much because there's so many edges to defend against, and it's not going to develop into that much. So I was sort of on a smooth sailing mode. I was trying to kind of just bring the game naturally to the end. So I was indirectly jumping in, peeping into the moyo. But then finally, a big thing happened in the upper left that made me really, really nervous. So at this point, I don't think this was necessary at all. I mean, sure, it's a big move because it reduces black's moyo, but then this upper left group was clearly in danger. I mean, yeah, white protected, with the large knight move and another knight's move, and white has a bunch of forcing moves. But really, this was so unnecessary because clearly white can just protect, and it's really worth a move. It's worth quite a lot of points. If black spends the first move, white would have 2 points, even if white lives. But if white spends them, white would clearly have some points. Right? Defending the center is just, it's just, maybe 15, 20 points. That's it. So it's really not worth the risk here. But, I had a lot of time. I was like, I read this out. I have all moves to counter. Kill me. Which was such a, it feels, it's a good feeling to convey that message forward to the opponent, but it's just not the logical move considering this is game 3. Winner goes into the finals. White would still be clearly ahead if white just simply protects. So that was a very unnecessary risk there. After peeping, black came over to attack. Now, I actually felt like black probably could have done a little bit better, but this is one of the situations where it's just so complicated and it's very hard to tell. But I was pretty confident as well. So after white pulls us back, even though black was able to connect the stone back, white had many forcing moves here as well as a cut. So white had many places to go about, and I was fairly confident that this would still, which is why I decided to make the connection at d18. And in this case, white lived, and after white lives, then black's territory deficit is really exaggerated because originally white was already ahead, right? After the upper left corner, black's originally maybe 10-point corner is now only 5 points. and white is completely alive. So that not only the only uncertainty on the board is gone, but black lost points. So at this point, I was pretty much just moving the game to the end because white has a very clear territory lead, and all white needs to do is secure the rest and make sure none of the groups die and stuff like that. So I made another slight mistake here in the upper right corner. Since black didn't play there, white didn't really need to greedily take that. All white needs to do is just get rid of the uncertainty, right? Just turn and jump. This would remove all uncertainty associated with the middle group, and that would be the end. So in the game, there was still a slight uncertainty here because black was able to live in the corner. But it was not a big deal because black had to lose points, and although black stole the corner, the gain was not enough to clear the deficit. So after that, I managed to carry the game towards the end. So after that, I was able to finish the game and claim the win. So overall thoughts about the semifinals. I mean, the first game, although I lost the game and there were many places where I made mistakes, but they were all quite small mistakes. Yeah, there was that big one, but my opponent just played so well in that game. So I'm actually overall super happy with the quality of the game. So there was no huge mistakes. Both players were in it most of the time. I mean, there were a couple mistakes by my opponent here early on, and as well as in game 2, my opponent made a few mistakes in the first fight of the game. But overall, it was such a nerve-wracking game because it was generally so close. There were so many places where you could make mistakes. And so I was constantly just, up against the screen staring and just making sure you're reading any possible variation. And I just love being in that moment, It's probably what I love most about playing in Go in general is that during the time when you're in the tournament, when you're in that moment, it's just it's almost like the world around you doesn't even exist. So Stephanie was in the other room, and I talked to myself sometimes when I'm playing on my own, and she was like, you were so loud talking to yourself, and she could hear me from the other room. And it really says I was just so caught up in the moment and I was just enjoying the games and enjoying myself that I was just forgetting about everything else. And of course, if you're able to win, that makes things even better. But I was so happy that I was able to, challenge myself and have such an enjoyable semifinal. Now, going into the finals, I'm going to play Ilya Shikshin, 4P. Now, I'm relatively familiar with Ilya now. He is one rank higher than me. He's also a crazy fighter and reader. He also has had much success winning against pros from China. It's going to be a tough match, but I'm sure I will have a blast playing in the finals once again. So I'm really looking forward to it. If you're watching this video on release, the final is in 2 days. It's on August 15th. So stay tuned and watch the streams if you have time. If not, don't worry, because in the next episode of the TPGL Adventures, I will cover my hard fight against Ilya Shikshin. That's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, make sure you drop a like. It really helps out the channel. Feel free to subscribe as well as check out our membership videos if you're interested in lectures. That's all for today. Ryan out. Take care, everyone.